My husband couldn't find his way anywhere. He couldn't read a map, and turn-by-turn directions only confused him more. He got lost on our wedding day and arrived so late the ceremony had to be pushed back 3 days. He got lost on our anniversary while the dinner I'd cooked went cold. 8 months pregnant, I fell in the bathroom and called him for help. He sounded frantic on the phone, then got lost on the road home, the same road he'd driven for 5 years. By the time he reached the hospital, our son had already been taken to the funeral home and cremated. I couldn't climb out of that grief, and everyone took his side. That thick head of his can't hold a road. He wasn't late on purpose. Don't start a fight over it. You'll have another baby. I nodded numb. Then, on the way to my son's funeral, I found out my husband had sent the driver away and taken a long detour to his assistant's house without a single wrong turn. Grace, service won't start for a while. I'll run Paige to the airport first. She has to get home. Before I could refuse, we were already at her door. His assistant slid into the front passenger seat like it belonged to her. See how well I've trained you? You forget the way to my place, and I'll pull your pants down and deal with you. Only when she noticed me in the back seat did she stick out her tongue. Sorry, Miss Ellison. I was joking. I said nothing. After Owen dropped her off, he lost the route to the cemetery again. My son's funeral started half an hour late. Holding that small urn against my chest, I stopped, hoping so there was someone he could make an exception for. It just wasn't me, and it wasn't our son. I pushed Elliot's urn into Owen's hands and got behind the wheel myself. Neither of us spoke. Owen pressed a hand to his head. Grace, I'm sorry. I went over the route last night. I don't know how I remembered the map he'd been studying before bed. The pin he dropped was Paige's house. Owen really was terrible with directions. Since childhood, someone had always had to go find him. Before our wedding, our friend Nadia used to tease him. Grace is basically your GPS. Let's hope the baby doesn't take after you. Only now did I understand there were places he could remember. The roads had never been the whole problem. At Cedar Vale Memorial Park, I lowered my son's urn into the grave and cried until I could barely see. In the middle of the service, Owen stood up. Something happened to Paige. I'd lost count of how many times he'd walked out on me for her. A prenatal appointment he'd promised to attend. One call from Paige, and he was gone. Our anniversary dinner booked months ahead, cancelled without hesitation. This time I screamed, if you walk out now, we're done. Owen stopped. It's urgent. Don't make a scene. Our son is gone. And his own father can't spare 5 minutes to say goodbye. What is so important that it has to be you? He hesitated. Paige says she's going to kill herself. Something terrible happened to her family. I can't just leave her. Call the police and request a welfare check. I stood there alone in black and said goodbye to our son. After the service, I opened the location app. Owen had driven 300 miles without stopping. A few hours later, his location settled precisely on Paige's hometown of Foxmere. He hadn't wasted a single minute. I pulled up Vivian Marsh's number. Draft me a divorce agreement. The next day, I went to see Owen's grandmother. To my surprise, he'd brought Paige home with him. The family exchanged looks but said nothing. I'd spent 10 years building my career before deciding to have a baby, and then I hadn't been able to keep him. As far as Owen's family was concerned, that made me selfish. Couldn't even hold on to one baby. All that celebrating for nothing. Hurry up and try again. Nobody asked why there'd been water on the bathroom floor. Nobody asked how weak my body still was. I set down my fork. There won't be another one. Ruth Kessler's smile froze. Owen rushed to smooth things over. Grace just isn't ready yet. Grandma, we'll try again later. After dinner, he came looking for me. Why would you say that? You know how badly Grandma wants a great-grandson. I held out the divorce papers. Sign. If she wants a great-grandson, you can have one with somebody else. Before he could react, Paige appeared in the doorway. Owen barely glanced at what I was holding before signing. Then he smiled at Paige. You closed that account beautifully. And you've had a lot going on at home. Name whatever gift you want. Paige looked at me. Could I have your necklace, Grace? My fingers tightened. That necklace was part of a set made for the three of us. Owen had designed it himself and stood over the jeweler while it was made. He didn't recognize it. Give it to her. Grace got plenty of jewelry. You won't miss one piece. Paige lit up. You're sure? I asked. Only then did Owen lean closer. He hesitated, then frowned. Grace, I already told her she could have it. It looks bad for a boss to take back his word. I'll have another one made for you. The divorce agreement sat between us. What was left to care about? Fine. I pulled the matching bracelet from my pocket. The third piece of the set meant for our family of 3. They could have all of it. Without the necklace, I felt strangely lighter. That night, I prepared to leave. Owen followed me. Grace, are you angry? I'll buy you a new one. Pick whatever you like. Every option he showed me came from the same collection. He was right. I wasn't short on jewelry. I was short on a husband who meant what he gave me. I pointed at one at random and went home to pack. I didn't expect Owen to follow. He rubbed his hands together awkwardly. I drove behind you the whole way. Paige is doing better, so I sent her home. I didn't answer. I was clearing out the nursery. He watched, confused. Why are you tearing it down already? We'll have another baby, then we'll just have to set everything up again. Even now, he thought I was sulking. Every morning for months, I never felt Elliot move. He had no idea what every small kick had meant to me. I went to bed without answering. The next morning, Paige was in my house. She dropped to her knees. Grace, please help me. You're the only one who can. Owen tried to pull her up, but she refused. My grandmother is alone in a country cemetery. I want to bring her closer to the city. Please give her a home. I stared at her. That was a conversation for a cemetery, not me. Owen blocked the door. Paige has never asked you for anything. At least hear her out. Paige's eyes filled. Your baby was so small, he doesn't need a whole plot to himself. Grandma's urn go along one side. The space is just sitting there empty. She wanted my dead son to share his grave with a stranger. No. Grace, please think about how much I loved her. Never. Owen stepped into my path. Grace, I gotta say, too. Sharing a plot isn't unheard of. Stop being so old-fashioned. I grabbed his shirt and slapped him. Say that again over my dead body. Paige immediately moved between us. Grace, take it out on me, not him. I'll take Grandma back to the country. I thought that was the end of it. That evening, Owen grabbed my shoulders. Paige already backed off. What more do you want? Why would you send her a letter like that? That boy was unlucky to get a mother like you. No wonder he didn't make it. I stared at him. What? His anger faded a little. I know you're upset, but you didn't have to threaten her. She already gave up, and now she can't sleep. I didn't send anything. I'm calling the police. I looked him in the eyes. We're getting divorced. He had believed to set up that obvious, without asking me. Once I remembered our wedding vows. If you say it happened, I'll believe you. If you say it didn't, I won't believe anyone else. He still gave that trust freely, just not to me. Used to be his navigation. Now he'd learned every road for another woman. There was nothing left for me to be. The argument went nowhere. Owen left again. The day after I gave my statement to the police, Dale Pruitt from Cedar Vale Memorial Park called me in a panic. Miss Ellison, there's a crew at your family's plot. They're opening it for a shared burial. They say your husband approved it. My heart dropped. I drove there as fast as I could. By the time I arrived, they had most of the grave open. I threw myself toward them. Get away from him. What are you doing at my son's grave? Two men caught me and slammed me to the ground. Quit screaming. This is Paige's spot now. We'll do whatever we want with it. They held me down. I screamed for Owen and Paige. Where are they? Owen promised me this was over. No one cared. I watched them open the grave, lift out my son's urn, and place Dolores Norwood in the center. They pushed Elliot's ashes to the side like something they were finished with. Then a boot came down. Don't. The urn shattered. My son's ashes blew into the wind. I clawed at the ground, trying to gather them. He'd been so small, there was barely a handful of him, and the wind took him everywhere. I came away with nothing. Something inside me went completely dark. By the time Owen and Paige arrived, the grave had already been sealed again. Paige ran toward the men and slapped one. What were you thinking? I told you Grace hadn't agreed. I told you Grandma was staying in the country. They lowered their heads. Our mistake, Paige. We thought Grandma couldn't wait. Owen looked at the wreckage, then at me. All I had left was a splinter from Elliot's urn. He crouched beside me. Grace, it's already done. Let it go. They know they were wrong. We'll light a memorial candle for him at Starlight Remembrance Chapel. I grabbed his coat. He stepped on it on purpose. Want it? Even then I break her grandmother's urn and scatter her ashes, too. Paige's eyes filled immediately. Grace, my grandmother was an old woman. She doesn't deserve that. My cousin. Run hot, but they're not bad people. They'd never do something like that on purpose. My son was the one who could take it. I looked at Owen. Which of us do you believe? He hesitated, then he quietly moved between us. For her, I whispered. You'd go this far for her? Owen frowned. I just don't want this getting more complicated. What's done is done. Let it end here, and we'll call it even for the letter. I told you I didn't send that letter. I've already filed a report. I shoved him away. Then I took a tire iron to the car we'd driven away from our wedding in, and I drove off, without looking back. Guilt had Owen studying every street around the neighborhood. He was preparing to surprise Grace with it. He came home to an empty house. Then Paige called in a panic. Owen, the cemetery says I have no burial rights here. Did Grace give the plot back? Crew showed up and started removing Grandma's urn. Her voice rose into a scream. My grandmother's ashes. You have no right to scatter her. Owen stood frozen, barely processing her panicked cries. What? By the time he reached the cemetery, Paige was draped over the open dirt, sobbing uncontrollably. Owen, she had my grandmother dug up, and half her ashes were lost. What monster desecrates the dead? A sudden crushing pang hit his chest. His son had suffered the exact same fate. Only now, seeing Paige's grief, did he finally grasp the agony Grace had carried alone. Paige tugged his sleeve, wiping her tears. This is all Grace's fault. How could she relinquish the plot without telling us? I'll handle it, Owen said, his tone detached. Paige bit her lip, unsatisfied. That's it. Half my grandmother's ashes are gone. I'm not letting this go. Owen's gaze turned ice cold. You're not letting it go? Then why did you tell Grace to calm down when her son's ashes were crushed underfoot? Paige? Paige froze, caught off guard by his sudden fury. Owen turned on his heel, climbed into his car, and drove off. He navigated the roads home with ease now, but the house was completely empty. Grace had vanished without a trace. Sitting in the dim living room drinking alone, his eyes landed on the custom necklace on the side table. He had been completely insane to give away the token of his family. He dialed Paige immediately. I commissioned a new jewelry set for you. Return Grace's necklace. Paige hesitated. I lost it. Owen shot up from the sofa. Lost it? Where? You were wearing it yesterday? Retrace your steps and find it. It's just a necklace, Paige whined. Is it really worth tearing up the city over? Owen snapped. Paige shifted tactics, her voice sweet and helpless. What about my grandmother's plot? You promised you'd take care of it. Owen frowned. Her damsel in distress routine, which had once drawn him in, now grated on his nerves. He realized whatever fleeting attraction he had felt for her was nothing compared to the 10 years he had built with his wife. The next morning, Owen issued an executive order transferring Paige to a remote branch office in the middle of nowhere. Furious, Paige kicked open the bedroom doors mid-meeting. Owen, what is this transfer? You promised me a promotion. What future do I have at a remote branch? He looked at her without any warmth at all, then quit. She stared at him as she'd never seen him before. It was probably the first time she had. For a long moment, she couldn't get a word out. Even the people around the table started glancing at each other. What happened between him and his assistant? Weren't they practically family? No idea. Word is she ran his wife off. Say what you want. An affair is an affair. Doesn't matter how respectable she dresses it up. The color came and went in her face. The meeting room went quiet. Paige's face burned red. She looked around for someone to defend her, but every person at the table suddenly became fascinated with their paperwork. Owen closed the folder in front of him. Meeting's over. Paige followed him into his office. You can't do this to me. I already did. You promised me I would become department director. I promised a lot of things before I knew what you were doing. Her eyes widened. You believe Grace? Owen laughed once, bitterly. I don't know what I believe anymore. Paige stepped closer. After everything I'd done for you? That sentence made him look up. What exactly have you done for me? She froze. You were there when I needed you, she whispered. And my wife was there for 10 years. Paige's expression changed. You still love her. Owen didn't answer. That was answer enough. Meanwhile, I was 3 towns away. I had checked into a small hotel under my mother's maiden name and turned off every device Owen knew about. For the first time in years, nobody knew where I was. And I liked it. Vivian arrived that afternoon with the completed divorce papers. She placed them on the table. Everything is ready. Your house, your investments, your shares, and the compensation written into the agreement are all protected. I signed without hesitation. Then Vivian looked at me carefully. Grace, there's something else. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs from Cedar Vale Memorial Park. The cemetery had security cameras. The footage showed the workers opening Elliot's grave, and standing behind them was one of Paige's cousins. Another photograph showed him carrying a box marked with a cemetery seal. I stared at it. Who hired them? That's the interesting part. Vivian tapped the final page. The payment came from a company controlled by Paige. I leaned back. So the cemetery disaster hadn't been an accident. Paige had arranged it. She had wanted me furious enough to look unstable while she played the grieving granddaughter. And Owen had walked straight into it. I smiled. Send everything to the police. Vivian nodded. And there's more. She opened another file. This was recovered from the cemetery office. It was a copy of an authorization form. My name appeared at the bottom, except I had never signed it. I looked closer. The signature was almost perfect. Almost. Forgery. Exactly. I closed the folder. Good. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Good. Now she can't pretend this was a misunderstanding. That evening, Owen called me from an unknown number. I answered. Grace. What? I need to see you. No, please. No. I found something. I laughed. You've been finding things rather late lately. His breathing changed. I know about the cemetery. So. I know Paige arranged it. I said nothing. I know she forged your signature. Still nothing. And I know you didn't send that letter. My fingers tightened around the phone. Congratulations. Grace, I was wrong. You were. I believed her over you. You did. I kept choosing her. You did that too. His voice cracked. Can I fix it? No. Why? Because you don't get to destroy my son's grave, believe another woman's lies, throw away our family, and then ask me to help you feel better about yourself. I'll make it right. You can't. I'll expose Paige. You should. I'll testify. You should. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. I smiled sadly. You still don't understand. Understand what? I'm not asking you to make up for anything. The line went silent. I'm leaving. Grace. I hung up. The next morning, the police arrested Paige's cousin. By noon, the cemetery footage was circulating among Owen's relatives. By 2, Ruth Kessler called me 12 times. I ignored every call. At 3, she showed up at Vivian's office. She didn't even sit down. You've ruined my grandson. Vivian looked up from her desk. Your grandson ruined his own marriage. You don't understand. Paige was manipulated. By whom? Ruth's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Vivian pushed the forged authorization across the desk. Your granddaughter-in-law's signature was forged to desecrate her child's grave. Ruth stared at it. Then her face strained. That can't be. It can. Ruth grabbed her purse and left. That night, Owen's family held an emergency meeting. Paige was summoned. She arrived crying. I never told them to destroy Elliot's grave. Owen placed the cemetery photographs on the table. Your cousin did. I told him to cancel it, after he had already done it. I swear. Owen looked at her. Why did you forge Grace's signature? Paige stopped crying. Nobody spoke. Owen stood. Answer me. I didn't. He threw another document onto the table. Your company paid for the workers. Paige stared at it. Then she whispered. I was trying to protect my grandmother. By destroying my son's grave, I thought Grace would eventually agree. Ruth slammed her hand against the table. You thought. Paige flinched. Ruth had spent years defending her. Now she looked at her like a stranger. You made us all accomplices to this. Paige began sobbing. Owen walked away. He didn't comfort her. He didn't even look back. 2 days later, I received one final message from him. I signed the divorce papers. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. You were right. Some roads I could remember. I just chose not to remember yours. I deleted it. Outside my hotel window, the sun was setting over a city where nobody knew my name. I put my hand over my stomach out of habit. Then I remembered there was no baby there anymore. My eyes burned. I let myself cry. Then I wiped my face, picked up my suitcase, and walked downstairs. I wasn't going back to Owen. I wasn't going back to his family. And I certainly wasn't going to spend the rest of my life letting Paige occupy space in my head. But before I left town, I had one last thing to do. I drove back to Cedar Vale Memorial Park. The cemetery was empty. I walked to the place where Elliot's grave had been. There was still a tiny piece of white ceramic buried beneath the grass, the broken edge of his urn. I picked it up and held it in my palm. I couldn't save you, I whispered. Then I looked toward the cemetery office. But I can make sure nobody gets away with what they did to you. I slipped the fragment into my pocket and walked away. Epilogue. 6 months later, Paige's entire life had collapsed. The cemetery investigation uncovered more than the forged authorization. Her cousin confessed that Paige had paid him to remove Elliot's urn and create the appearance that Grace had approved the shared burial. Then the police found the letter. The one Paige had claimed Grace sent her. It had been typed on Paige's laptop. She had forged that too. But the worst discovery came from her bank records. Paige hadn't been trying to help her grandmother. She had been trying to force Grace out. She knew Owen would always protect anyone he believed was helpless, so she kept creating emergencies. The suicide threats, the family crisis, the cemetery. Every disaster had been carefully timed, and Owen had fallen for every single one. When the truth became public, the company board removed Paige immediately. Then they investigated her accounts. She had been quietly diverting company expenses for years. Luxury hotels, designer bags, private trips, gifts charged to Owen's corporate account. The woman everyone had called innocent had simply been stealing in smaller amounts until she became confident enough to steal openly. Owen fired her himself. Then he filed a lawsuit. Paige's family abandoned her. Ruth stopped answering her calls. The same relatives who had once begged Owen to protect Paige were suddenly claiming they'd always known she was trouble. Paige ended up selling almost everything she owned to pay legal fees. And Owen? He lost nearly everything too. The divorce settlement wasn't the reason. His own choices were. Investors questioned his judgment. The board questioned his management. Employees questioned whether the man who couldn't recognize his wife's pain was capable of running a company. He eventually resigned. The apartment was sold. The cars were sold. Even the old wedding car I'd once loved was gone. Owen kept one thing, the necklace he'd given Paige. He had recovered it from a pawn shop after she sold it. The clasp was broken. One of the tiny stones was missing. He kept it anyway. Every night, he placed it beside his bed, because there was nowhere else for it to go. A year after Elliot's death, Owen went to Cedar Vale alone. He stood beside the empty grave for hours. He had brought flowers. He had brought a new urn. He had even brought the jeweler's original design for the family necklace. But there was nobody left to accept any of it. The cemetery caretaker eventually approached him. "Sir, visiting hours are over." Owen nodded. Before leaving, he crouched beside the grass. "I'm sorry, Elliot." His voice broke. "I should have been there." He stared at the ground. "I should have chosen you." Then he laughed bitterly. "Your mother always said I couldn't find my way anywhere." He looked toward the cemetery entrance. "Turns out I could." He wiped his eyes. "I just kept choosing the wrong destination." Meanwhile, I was 3 states away. I had started over. A smaller house. A new office. A new life. I still had nightmares sometimes. I still woke up reaching for a baby who wasn't there. Some wounds didn't disappear because the villain was punished, but they stopped controlling my life. One afternoon, Vivian called. "Grace, Owen wants to transfer the remaining assets to you." "I don't want them. You haven't heard the amount." "I don't care." She paused. "He says it's Elliot's." That made me quiet. Owen had put Elliot's name on an account and transferred everything remaining from our marriage into it. The money would eventually fund a children's hospital wing. I agreed to accept it. Not for Owen. For Elliot. A month later, the hospital announced the new wing. The Elliot Ellison Children's Care Center. Owen wasn't invited to the opening. He watched it on television from a rented apartment. When the camera showed me cutting the ribbon, he smiled through tears. I looked happy. Really happy. And for once, he didn't call. He didn't send a message. He didn't ask for another chance. He finally understood that loving me wasn't something he could demand after losing me. Paige eventually received her sentence for fraud and forgery. When she was led into court, she spotted Owen sitting in the back. She smiled. He didn't. "You're really going to let her take everything from us?" Paige whispered as she passed him. Owen looked at her. "You took everything from yourself." She stopped. "You still love Grace." Owen looked toward the courtroom doors. "Every day." Paige's face twisted. "Then why didn't you go after her?" He answered quietly. "Because she deserves a life that doesn't include me." Paige laughed bitterly. "She'll never forgive you." "I know." Then he stood. "And I finally know I don't deserve it." Years later, people would still remember the scandal. The assistant who forged her employer's wife's signature. The husband who chose his assistant over his grieving wife. The child whose grave was desecrated. But I stopped caring about the scandal. One spring morning, I stood outside the hospital wing with a little girl holding my hand. She looked up at the building. "Mommy, is this where you helped make the baby hospital?" I smiled. "Something like that." She squeezed my hand. "Did Daddy make it?" I looked across the parking lot. Owen was standing beside his car. He hadn't approached. He only nodded once. I nodded back. Then I turned away. He had spent 10 years being unable to find his way. When it mattered most, he finally found the right road. It just didn't lead back to me.